professors from Fort Wayne would commute to St. Louis to help the minority 5 after everybody else teaching in the gang walked out in 74.
So for those listening, can you kind of paint, so what is Seminex? And if you can kind of walk us through that.
Well, this was 50 years ago this last January. It was the result of the fact that historical critical method of biblical interpretation had found its way into the faculty, the majority faculty at St. Louis, and they were teaching kind of Rudolf Bultmann type stuff and taking the Bible apart, the quest for the historical Jesus, Schweitzer, that kind of stuff. Taking the Bible apart, not seeing it as the inerrant, infallible Word of God, but as the work of men. And this was the view of the faculty majority, and they would, teach these young seminarians, and they went home and started teaching in their catechism classes. From what I was told, mom and dad, kids would come home, did you know that Jonah is not real? And this enraged the laity, which led a large part of the reason they had at the New Orleans Convention in 1973, the president of the Synod was J.A.L. Price, and they called for an investigation of the St. Louis faculty over all this stuff. And the faculty at the investigation, they were censored. And I don't know the details off the top of my head, but what happened was they refused to abide by the rulings of the Synod. They felt they were being persecuted, and so they decided to stage a great walkout. And they wrote on the doors of the front of the seminary the word exiled, and they got the TV cameras from St. Louis. This TV stations, this was national news. And the students and the majority of the faculty all walked out. They staged a great walkout on national TV, thinking this would be the end of the St. Louis Seminary. Little known fact about that is that after the TV cameras turned off, they turned around and went back and had lunch in the cafeteria. I learned this from the Price boys and people like that.
Yeah.
Robert Price was a leading proponent of defending and supporting the seminary in those days. And the brother of Jack Price, who was the president of the Synod, they had the Synod back up and running very shortly after that, I think within months, maybe even sooner than that. They had small group there were the minority five minority faculty members who refused to walk out with the others. Martin Charlemagne was one of them. Ralph Bowman was one of them, actually. And that worked to his benefit when he became president of the Synod some years later, because they knew that he was one of the minority 5. And the seminary was up and running and was, back to its old self within a couple of years. And meanwhile, the Fort Wayne Seminary, Robert Price became the president of that seminary. And it was kind of known, even after the walkout, as the seminary that was kind of the driving force of confessional Lutheranism, because of Robert Price's bringing about humanly speaking, of a renaissance of confessional studies and a love for the Lutheran confessions. And the men he brought on board on the faculty, David Scare, William Weinrich, and at that time, James Veltz and others, were solid confessional Lutheran scholars. And this was something that was kind of new, not new, but renewed in the Synod, a resurgence of serious confessional scholarship.